I wish it was under other circumstances. I would say I'm happy to be here, but I'm not, based on what this is about. However, I'm happy to be here to be able to share some of the things that I found most helpful in working with my clients in private practice, helping and talking with family and friends and things like that, with the hope that this is kind of a ripple effect. We have all been affected by this to varying degrees. We all have loved ones, family, friends who have been affected as well in different ways. And oftentimes in a situation like this, we're at a loss of where to start for ourselves so that we can help others. And there's a lot of emotions that come into it and a lot of different strategies I want to share tonight. The reason that I give you all a handout is that it's a lot of information. And so my hope is that by just having some keywords on there, you don't feel like you have to retain everything. Pick and choose what fits for you and what works. The hope is you never have to come back to this, but living in Florida, you might. And so hang on to it, because something will likely happen again and there might be another need for you to support yourself and others. A lot of these strategies are also things that can apply to other areas of our lives. In general, stress management, of helping when someone is going through something tough. And so being able, my hope is that everyone's able to take one thing from here to help themselves during this time and one thing to help other people. There's a chance you'll take more than that, which would be wonderful. But to be honest, if each person takes one thing to help themselves and one thing to help someone else, I will feel like that is a job well done. And my hope is, again, that that's that ripple effect, that then you can go out into the community, take care of yourself, and take care of others. I want to acknowledge, you come on in, yeah. I want to acknowledge that we all have been in this together. And so we probably have all seen different things that are helpful, or maybe things that aren't so helpful. I want you to feel really comfortable jumping in and letting me know if there's something that I say that triggers a thought for you of, oh, actually, a neighbor did this, or this was something I found helpful. Jump in, because if it helped you, it might help someone else in here as well. Matt also informed me that if whoever is watching online, if you have questions, send them to Matt and he can bring them to the group. Whether they be comments, questions, if there's clarification, please feel free to jump in. Again, we've all been through this together and everyone has kind of their unique insights or maybe even unique situations that they might want some extra support with, all right? We also, as we have all been through this together, we, to varying degrees, have been in a state of fight or flight, all of us. Whether it was recovering from the first one, preparing for the second one, that's a long time to be in fight or flight. And I want to explain, if you've been to a presentation of mine before, you've probably seen this, because this is something I talk about in most presentations that I do and with almost every client who walks through my door, because it is so important. So here, we're going to get a little quick science lesson. We won't get too into the details, but there's a reason that I want to explain this. So if we look in this autonomic nervous system here, okay, within the peripheral nervous system, for kind of a quick overview, is the stuff that we do, we tell our body to do, and we can have movement, okay? So it's our muscles, all of those things. If I want to walk to the door, I send a message to my legs and I walk to the door. That's under the somatic nervous system, the voluntary movement. Autonomic is where we really want to focus our attention when we're talking about fight or flight, because autonomic is the automatic stuff. So this is heart rate, digestion, immune functioning, all of the fight or flight stuff, and also the recovery stuff. Even though it's automatic, we can control it. If I want to breathe more quickly, I can do that. If I want to slow down my breathing, I can do that. So even though I don't have to think about that most of the time, our autonomic nervous system can be controlled. The reason this is important is underneath this, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system work a little bit like a seesaw. When we're talking about fight or flight, we're talking about the sympathetic nervous system. That's the part that if there's a bear chasing us, we want that system active. We want to repress the parasympathetic nervous system and pop up that sympathetic so we can get out of there. It's really important. We never want to get rid of this. But when it's overactive, when we're stuck in fight or flight, the parasympathetic nervous system is depressed, and that's rest and digest. This is why we get immune issues. This is why we can't sleep. This is why our body doesn't repair itself. This is why we get digestive issues. Has anyone ever experienced stress and either you lose your appetite or your appetite goes haywire? That's because of this. That part controlled with digestion and all of that, that's within the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems. So again, if we look at sympathetic as fight or flight, if that's real high, we have to get some activity to the parasympathetic to balance it. And I'll tell you, it is much easier to pull this up, to pull the parasympathetic up, to pull that fight or flight down as opposed to just trying to push down the fight or flight. Pushing down the fight or flight might look like avoidance. It might look like drugs and alcohol. It might look like just trying to sleep and numb out to the world. But you're much better off trying to increase the parasympathetic activity. The reason I wanted to get a little nerdy with that for a second is the nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, is increased through slow, deep breathing. It's the number one way to do it. The inhale pulls us into fight or flight. If you've ever seen an Olympic racer, a lot of times they'll go to get a lot of air in because they want to be in fight or flight. They want the adrenaline because that will help them in their race. We don't need that. We've got enough cortisol and adrenaline to last a lifetime. We want to pull back from that. And so we want to increase our exhale. The parasympathetic nervous system is activated when we do our exhale. So I want to share with everyone, again, just to get us all in a calm space to be able to absorb this information and even just take a little break from that heightened state of alertness to get us all into the parasympathetic nervous system. Number one way to do that is slow, deep breathing, but there's a specific way that I teach it that's kind of the research-based way that helps the most. And it's a very easy one, but I want to equip everyone with that. And if this is all you take with you, and if it's all you want to share with anyone else, I guarantee you it will be a blessing to them, okay? So what this looks like is an inhale of 6 through your nose, real slow. Again, we don't want the, we want real slow through your nose. Inhale of 6, hold it, add a little bit more air, you kind of top off, and then an exhale of 8, okay? So inhale of 6, you hold it, and an exhale of 8, real slow. So I want to do 2 rounds of this just to get everyone, to get a good feel for it. I do want to warn you, if you have a trauma history or even if you're just feeling a little bit heightened right now, no need to close your eyes. Sometimes that can be triggering. You can keep your eyes open. All right? Okay, so everyone exhale. Get all the air out. All right, and now we'll inhale. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold it. Add a little more air. And then exhale. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, inhale. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold it. Add a little more air. And then exhale. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? So everyone who just participated in that has now activated their rest and digest system, which is great. It's great to do proactively, just every day getting into the habit of reminding your body that it can pull itself out of fight or flight and that nothing bad will happen, it will be okay. And then it's also good to use reactively if you notice that you're in a heightened state of stress to be able to pull it out. But you want to have practiced, and that's where the daily, stacking it with another habit, like if you're waiting for your water to fill, if you're sitting at a red light, practice it so that when you really need it, your body's not trying to familiarize yourself with it. You already know what it feels like, and you can jump right in, okay? But the reason that I like to explain this is the why behind it. If you've ever been told when you're in a heightened state of panic, oh, just take a deep breath, it feels very dismissive. But there's science behind it, and if you can do it right, it can be a game changer. It is, again, the number one way to pull our body out of that fight or flight. And that, again, I think we've all had some degree of that in the last couple of weeks, and we want to make sure that we're regularly getting a little bit more settled. Okay, any questions about that?
You just need 2 of those?
Honestly, if you just do 2, that's a huge, huge start, okay? 2 a couple times a day, 3 or 4 if you really want to. You don't need to be doing this all the time. I don't do this all the time. I don't walk around all day long doing the slow, deep breathing. But for sure, if it's maybe 3 in the morning, 3 at night, just to get your body used to it. If it feels good, do a whole 3-5 minutes of it. But I try to make it as digestible as possible because you get the impact and you get the benefits. So absolutely, 2 is plenty. That's great. And then if you want to add on to it, absolutely great as well. Okay? There's no right or wrong with it. If you're adding it in, that's awesome. Okay? Any other questions? Okay. So I want to talk about sitting with mixed emotions because I would say that's kind of a hallmark of everything that we've been through recently, both individually and as a community. So many mixed emotions. And so most of us have experienced and will continue to experience that myriad of emotions. It could be fear, grief, sadness. It could be relief. I've heard a lot of guilt, actually. This idea of people who feel like they got out unscathed and maybe the person right next door to them did not, or maybe their closest friend or loved one did not. And this feeling of guilt of, okay, I'm feeling relief, but my heart's also breaking for this person. And another fear is, well, it was this close to being me. And so it's the, well, what if? And getting stuck in that and just having all of those strong emotions, we got to make space for all of them. Being able to make space for them for ourselves is important. Being able to make space for others is also important, but you got to have your own oxygen mask on. If you are worn thin and your bandwidth is maxed out, it is not the time to be the ear for someone else. And we'll talk about kind of where to find that ear in a minute, but just being able to recognize where you are. It might not even be related. If you feel like one of those people who got out unscathed, but you happen to have a really crazy work thing going on or another family thing going on, and you feel like, okay, I should probably be here for these other people. If you don't have the bandwidth, you don't have the bandwidth. And it's not going to serve anyone well for you to go into those situations if you are not feeling like there's space for what you need as well. Being able to acknowledge the emotions, one of the examples that I tend to use is this idea that we're all drivers of the bus, our own bus, and all of our emotions are in the back. So there's anxiety, depression, guilt, grief, relief, stress, all of these things, they're in the back of the bus. They have to stay in the back of the bus, okay? Where we get in trouble is when they push us out of the driver's seat and they start driving. So if that's anxiety that says, okay, I don't have the bandwidth, I just need to stay home. Could be a self-love thing, but could be just a fear-based thing that maybe isn't the best fit. But anxiety will say, no, 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 I'm going to jump in the driver's seat. You hop back there. I got this. It's not going to steer us where we need to go. Being able to identify what emotions in the back of the bus are trying to tell us and what emotions they even are is really important. Pulling up even, I use them all the time in my practice, an emotion chart. It's like an emotion wheel, and it has like 60 different emotions. Look at it. Circle the ones. It can be so overwhelming when there's so many. Literally look at the piece of paper or look on the computer and say, okay, this one, this one, this one, this one. Okay, why am I feeling this one? What's the message here? Just trying to pull apart what we're feeling. And the reason I use this stained glass picture here, this is what situations do in our brain and in our over our lifetime. A stained glass with just one color is pretty, but it's not as beautiful as when there's lots of different colors. And if we think about all those different colors as different emotions, that's where the vibrancy of life comes out, is the good stuff and the not so good stuff. And again, if we're just recognizing them as emotions in the back of the bus, they're not scary. If I'm firmly in the driver's seat, it's not scary to me if anxiety starts yelling at me, or depression starts yelling at me, or grief starts yelling at me. It's okay, you need to be heard. What do we need to do to handle that? I'm a really big proponent and advocate of this idea of setting aside time for grief, whether it be for you, whether it be for a friend. Grief has a funny way of coming out when we don't want it to, of coming out all over everything all the time, and that's really overwhelming. But if we can, so say for example, that grief is in the back, little loss or big loss, and that grief is saying, I need to be heard, I need to be heard. You don't have to stop the bus right in that moment. You can say, okay, I hear you. 5:30 tonight, we got a date. 5:30 tonight, we're going to talk. Okay, it's 5:30. I have the brain space. I have the bandwidth. What's the grief trying to tell me? Do I need a friend to sit with me in that grief? Do I need a counselor to sit with me in that grief? Or can I sit with this and see what comes up? 30 minutes to let that grief tell you what it needs to tell you. And then you say, okay, grief, I hear you. I'll be back again tomorrow at 5:30. And that way, when the stuff comes up at other times, you're telling it to wait, but you're giving it a time when you're going to come to it. The worst case is when grief is telling you, I need to talk, I need to talk, I need to talk, and you say, not going to listen. It will get louder and louder and louder. And then the earmuffs stay on, I can't focus on anything else, as opposed to, okay, it's just a messenger. Let me check in with it, see what it needs to tell me. But setting aside that time for big emotions, whether it be grief or other emotions, gives us the opportunity to feel like we're still in the driver's seat. If you've been to a talk of mine, you've heard me talk about the shoulds. This is something I share with everyone, personal and professional life. If you talk to me, I will talk your ear off about the shoulds. The word should is my least favorite word in the English language. When the should is involved, if it's turned inward, I should have done this, I shouldn't have done that, it's guilt and shame immediately. On top of whatever it is we're disappointed about, there's a layer of guilt and shame there. It does not serve us well. There is literally no purpose to it. It's almost like a tough love thing. I see this a lot in perfectionists, and I consider myself a recovering perfectionist. But the shoulds are the thing that we use to beat ourselves up so we don't make the same mistake. But to be honest, it just weighs us down. So when we have the shoulds on ourselves, it's just about semantics, being able to catch ourselves. And I guarantee once you start noticing it, you'll notice it everywhere. I should have done this, I shouldn't have done that. To replace it and say, okay, I wish I hadn't done this. I wish I wasn't feeling this way. But I am, or but I did. What do I do now? So the very easy example I always share with this, if I have 10 things to do today and I get 7 of them done, and I go to bed tonight thinking, oh, I should have gotten all 10 things done. I'm replaying my day and I'm beating myself up over how long this took or the time I wasted here or these things or that thing. I'm not actually proactive or productive with it. I'm just beating myself up. As opposed to saying, I wish I had gotten all 10 things done. I got 7 done. Here's how I'm going to rearrange my day tomorrow to get those 3 that I didn't get to done tomorrow. And now I'm also going to catalog, okay, where did I go wrong today so that I can make sure when I have another big day like this, I make sure to steer clear of those things so I can get them done. I'm not saying it's wonderful that I didn't get all 10 done, but I'm also not getting bogged down in the should of it. So being able to recognize where that should comes in and being able to replace those shoulds becomes really important when they're turned inward. So for example, in a hurricane situation like this, well, I should be grateful. Some people lost everything. I've heard this several times from both personal and professional experiences. We just lost both of our cars. I should be grateful. Any day that you lose 2 cars is a pretty bad day. You're allowed to have big emotions about that. That's okay. So there's no should. Okay, I wish that I wasn't feeling so bogged down in this. Okay, I do want to feel grateful and I want to recognize what I'm grateful for, but I can also recognize there's grief and there's loss and there's frustration for these things that I need to do, even if they don't seem as monumental as what other people are going through. But recognize where the should is and be able to replace it. The other piece where I see shoulds coming out quite a bit is when we put shoulds on others. He should be doing this. She should be doing that. They should know what I'm going through right now. They should know how to help me. Resentment, when we put a should on someone else, resentment builds immediately. Just like guilt and shame, when we turn it inward, it's resentment. I now have an expectation of someone that I haven't even told them about, and they're falling short of it, so now I'm resentful. So when our shoulds get put on other people, when we see people in the community, maybe they're getting back to what looks like normal life and we're thinking, well, shouldn't they be trying to do something to help the community? Shouldn't they be trying to help in some way or acknowledging these things? We have no idea what's going on in their world. So instead being able to say, I wish they were doing these things, now I have either action or acceptance. Do I want to say something to them about it? Is it an action-oriented thing that I actually need to express what I need from them? If I'm saying they should know what I need, well, maybe they don't. Do I want to tell them? Or is it acceptance? And being able to say, that's what they're choosing to do. I'm not in their head. I wish they were doing something different, but I can't control that. I have now taken that resentment out of me, and it's disappeared. And when we have anger and resentment, you guys have probably heard this, but that idea of drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, it affects us. So if we've got the shoulds about what they're doing and how they're not doing right, they don't probably care. But it's eating us up inside. So if we can get rid of the shoulds that we put on others, and for sure, if there are close family and friends who you're putting shoulds on, so say, for example, it's a spouse, a family member, a neighbor who you're close with, take the action route. Let them know how they can help you. Let them know where you're misunderstanding, where there's a conflict there. Give them the benefit of the doubt that they're probably a pretty good person doing the best they can. But the should doesn't leave any room for that communication. So avoiding the shoulds, recognizing when we're doing them to ourselves, when they're doing them to others, whether it be in this situation related to the natural disasters or even just in general life right now, the shoulds just don't get us anywhere good. So being gentle, being kind to ourselves and to others, and recognizing there is no right way to feel. There is no right way to handle this. There will be people who have to block it out. I have a couple different people that I know personally who have gone through other hurricanes that were really disastrous, in Katrina specifically, and they cannot even process what just happened with this. It's too close to home with everything. They have now moved to a different space and are fully avoiding, and that's what they need to do. And my thought is, do what you need to do. Do what you need to do. Process what you can when you can, and that's what we know about grief and loss is it is not an all or nothing. It might be you dip your toes in the water and that's enough. It might be that you can go fully swimming in that grief and then get out. But if you feel like swimming in that is going to drown you, do not go in without some support. There is no need to immerse yourself in that until you feel ready to. but recognizing you can start slowly by checking in with the emotions, feeling the emotions, checking in with friends, feeling how you can help others in the community, and then hopefully over time that will continue to grow and help heal you. There's also a chance that some of this stuff will come up again during the next hurricane season. Thoughts and feelings about this one. Great time to check in on friends who you know have had a really significant impact from this, and to see how they're doing with it. Because again, grief can come crashing in, or trauma can come crashing in when there's other triggers from it. All right, any questions about emotions in that sense? Okay. Talking about it becomes really important when you are able. And a lot of what we know, I was talking to Sally about this a couple minutes ago, but when it comes to post-traumatic stress, there's a lot of information that we have and research that we have over decades on post-traumatic stress. More recently, there's been a lot of research on post-traumatic growth. This idea of what makes people more resilient. Two people can experience the same thing. One ends up deep in depression and anxiety. The other one maybe has some of that, but ends up really growing and becoming very resilient. And one of the things we know is support and being able to talk about trauma after it's occurred is a very, very, very big factor in being able to heal from it. Not only do you get the opportunity to process it, but you also get the opportunity to gain skills from people, get validated by people versus being stuck in your own head. And so whether it's that you need to talk to a trusted friend or family member about your experience, or you want to be someone that other people can talk to, make space for it. Make space for those things and allow all of the emotions to take up some room. That it doesn't need to be something that is fully avoided. Being able to not get that wave crashing over you means that you can use distraction with intention. It's one thing to distract and say, okay, I'm putting on the earmuffs, I'm never going to hear about this, I don't want to talk about it. It's another thing to say, for right now, it's heavy, and I need to go for a walk with a friend and talk about anything but that. That is a great question to ask anyone who you know who's going through a lot right now, whether it be, again, related to this or even just other things over the lifetime. Do you want to talk about it, or do you want to talk about other stuff? Don't assume. Because there are some people who want to talk about it but won't talk about it until they get the invitation to talk about it. They might think it's too heavy. So being able, if you have the bandwidth to offer that to someone, to be able to say, hey, can we talk about this? Or do you want to talk about this or no? Or if it's you who needs to talk about it, tell someone. Tell them, hey, would you mind if I talk about it? Most of the time, people are going to be more than willing to hold space for that, but they might not want to broach it until you do. So being able to set aside that time to feel it, but then also know that you can have a toolbox, which we'll get to in a minute, a toolbox of things that can help you when your bandwidth needs a little bit of replenishing, when you're stretched a little bit too thin. With that in mind, and with this idea of being able to be a receptacle of other people's stuff, you got to be mindful of where you are. Is if you are feeling like it is a one-upmanship of, well, this happened to me, well, this happened to me, well, this happened to me, that's not going to be helpful. Being able to avoid any kind of comparison, being able to avoid any kind of invalidation of your own stuff, of, oh, well, you had it so much worse than me, I shouldn't complain. It's been a really crazy couple weeks. Gosh, you got hit so hard. Just let them have their stuff, let you have your own stuff. Be aware of your audience, recognizing that some people may not have even shared how much they were affected or how much the stress has impacted them, and check in. Is it okay for us to talk about this right now? Is this too much? And then being able to check in with yourself, see where you are, and then seek professional support or offer professional support. If you feel like you are at the end of your ability to help care for someone, let them know, hey, I am more than happy to do a little digging for you. Would it be helpful for me to get you some names? I feel like this is out of my wheelhouse. And the support is out there, I just don't have it. Can I help you get some support? Because even just finding someone to talk to is overwhelming when you're in the middle of it. Maybe that can be your role as a friend or a neighbor or a loved one of, let me get you some names. I can do the legwork on that. With that being said, and my email's on this, if you have questions about these names, but I'll give you two names. So Ali Sager is a professional psychologist here in Tampa, and she has a private practice, and they are doing some group sessions for anyone who needs support from experience with the hurricane. They're doing a support group. It's Ali Sager and Associates is her practice, and then they're also offering a discounted rate of $50 per session for anyone who needs some help and support after the hurricane. On the Pinellas side, another colleague of mine, her name is Stacia Parsons. She is running a Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening, I think it's about 6 p.m. on Sunday evening, support group for people who do want to come in. I will say, support groups should not be war stories. It should not be, this is what I came home to. It should be, how are we coping with this? Because what we know, and I did trauma groups for a very long time at the VA, what we know is the war stories don't help anyone. That can be done individually with a professional or a friend, if that's someone who has the capacity, but it does not need to be done in a room where everyone is just spilling all their stuff, because you will leave feeling worse than you came. Or it turns into the comparison game. So for sure, whether it be either of those groups or any other, if it feels like it's starting to be a let's just share war stories, excuse yourself, email me, and I'll find you another group, okay? Just being careful to make sure that any interactions you are and you're feeling better when you leave than when you came, if that's what you're looking for, all right? That does not mean that it won't be painful to be able to talk through some of these things for people. In the analogy that I use in working with people who've dealt with trauma is an injury. It's as if you've gotten a really deep injury, and then we want to kind of put a Band-Aid on it, and especially if it's old trauma, we want to just kind of leave it and put a bandage on it and not really think about it. Unfortunately, it festers. And then we get to a point where we say, okay, I should probably clean this out. Cleaning out a wound does not feel good, but the hope is when you clean it out, it heals. You might have a scar, you will have a scar, you'll always have that memory, but it won't be festering anymore. And that's the talking about it piece, is we want these memories to move around like normal memories. We don't want them crystallized in a little trauma ball that every time you get triggered, there's an overflow of emotions. But being able to talk through it, work through it over time, gives you the opportunity to clean it out, even if it's painful, to clean it out so it will heal correctly. So if you notice anyone who still is seeming affected, say in 3 months, 6 months, a year, they're still in fight or flight, encouraging them, say, you know, this seems like it's still affecting you. Do you have any interest in going and talking out? You went through a lot. Is there any interest in going to talk to someone? Again, I'm happy to do the legwork for you on that, okay? This is something I really like. It's called the ring theory. Is anyone familiar with this? This is the idea of kind of where to get support and where to provide support. So this is a tricky one with this dynamic because we've all been affected. I'm going to talk first about examples in terms of if it's just one specific person in need, and then we can kind of extrapolate to this situation that's affected so much of our community. So if we think of someone, we'll say someone who lost a loved one has passed away. The person in need is in the middle, okay? And so the person in need has the opportunity to vent out, if you look at this bottom area, to anyone there. They can vent out to partners, best friends, close friends, coworkers, acquaintances. They're the person in need. So all of their venting should go outward, and then all of the support can come from those levels, okay? If we go a step out, so partner, best friends, things like that, we don't want, as partner or best friend, I don't want to be venting in to the person in need. That's not my person to go to look for support. I want to support them, but then I want to turn outwards to these outer rings and find support from the step outside of me. Who's the next level? Who can provide me support so that I can then in turn provide the person in need support? Then beyond that, we have acquaintances, coworkers, all of that. Obviously, we can see we wouldn't want acquaintances venting to the person most in need. That doesn't make sense. But we can also see how that can get kind of blurry in a situation like this where so many people are affected. So being able to be flexible with it, but recognize if you're the person who had some water damage, had to evacuate, or maybe even just had the chaos of evacuating, or the stress of knowing these 2 storms are coming, if there is a person in need more so than you, they're not the person for you to go to for support. But there are people on those outer circles that you can absolutely turn to. It's that awareness of where to turn for the support and where to provide support. Does that make sense? Okay, any questions about that? Okay, it's a great thing just to keep in mind. Again, it's never going to be perfect because a lot of things affect a lot of people, but just in general, making sure that you are turning to the people who can provide support versus the ones who are looking for the support. All right? Okay. Obviously, taking care of yourselves, we're going to start with taking care of yourselves, and then we're going to talk about taking care of others. This is the oxygen mask stuff. You got to put your own on, or you're not going to be any help to anyone for any length of time. Making sure you're filled up. I tend to use this analogy of, or kind of imagery, that we all have this internal rubber band. And all of our stressors go into this rubber band. And that rubber band can get stretched out by a lot of little things, or it can get stretched out by one giant thing. I'd say a hurricane, then 2 hurricanes, stretched our rubber bands out pretty far, okay? So when any stressors are going in that rubber band, we have 2 options. One, we need to look at what's in the rubber band and decide what fits. So if I have a client who's dealing with extreme anxiety, some of the anxiety in that rubber band might be out of proportion. So we want to shrink the space that takes up. Because of a fear or phobia, we got to figure out how to make it a little smaller. Being able, like we said, to pull out of fight or flight, because we aren't in a threatening position right now in terms of a natural disaster that we know of. Being able to say, right now I don't need to be that stretched thin. I won't jinx us, I'll knock on wood. But being able to recognize that rubber band is stretched out is important to be able to decide what needs to stay, what can go. The other piece, though, is increasing the flexibility of the rubber band. So these are the 2 things I work on with clients most, is figuring out what's inside the rubber band, what's taking up too much space, what can be processed, what can be let out, and then how do we increase the flexibility, because man, is it helpful to have a flexible rubber band. So when the big things come along, we have the flexibility to move with it. So taking care of ourselves, putting on our own oxygen mask, that's the flexibility, so that we have bandwidth for other people. So some of the things that might be included in this, and this is something great to share with other people who have gone through big things, is even if they're dealing with the overwhelm of recovering from these storms, can they still take care of themselves? Can they still find ways to engage in soothing or enjoyable activities, even if the desire isn't there? Depression, anxiety will say, don't do those things. They're not going to be that much fun. They're not going to be that beneficial. Do them anyways. Do them anyways, even if you feel like you're doing it half-heartedly. Do it anyways, because our brain eventually catches up with our body. Focus your attention on small daily habits. So this could be things like exercise, drinking enough water, making sure you're going to the grocery store. It could be that a neighbor or a friend or a loved one, they don't even have the capacity to do the cooking or the grocery shopping. Maybe that's something you could offer to them. So at least they have some nutritious meals or snacks, because if those baseline things, sleep, physical activity, and nutrition, are out of whack, that rubber band is going to be very brittle and not have much flexibility at all. So sticking with the basics, being able to focus your attention on the small daily habits that you know make you feel good, and making sure that you're spending time with people who make you feel good. Socializing with people that we care about is the #1 way to boost mood. Even if you're an introvert, interestingly. It's really important to connect with people who make us feel good. It boosts our well-being immensely. And then very much so focusing on one day at a time. And when you're starting to get overwhelmed, or if you notice a friend starting to get overwhelmed, being able to say, okay, what can we do today? What can we do today that will set me up better for tomorrow, or at least bring me a little bit of joy, a little bit of rest, some sense of recovery? In addition to kind of in the same vein as going along with doing the things even if you don't feel like it, reestablishing routines. If you've got kids, keep them in the same routines. If you've got grandkids, keep them in the same routines. If you have, say you are displaced or family members displaced and kids are out of their normal routine, my kids have a certain way that we do bedtime routine every night. Establish that in the new environment, even if it's an interim environment. Establish that routine. If you're used to doing highs and lows from your day, but you don't have a kitchen table because the kitchen flooded, do highs and lows elsewhere. But find ways to pull the routine in, even if you're out of sorts, even if you're displaced or a loved one's displaced, figure out what the routines are so that you can find almost a new normal during this time versus just white knuckling it, waiting for things to settle down. It's a great way to kind of jump back into things. And then limiting overexposure to the media. It's for better or for worse, which I actually don't even know if it's for better or for worse, because unfortunately there is so much devastation still around and we're not seeing it on the news cycle as much anymore, which is a good thing and a bad thing. I think it's hard for the people who have gone through it to say, okay, everyone's just kind of moved on. But it's also not super helpful to be overexposed to it. I will say, and I will make a little side note here about politics right now. If we're talking about bandwidth and rubber bands being stretched thin, if there's one way to stretch your rubber band thin, it's sit on Facebook and look at political discussions. Don't do it. Don't do it. It will fire you up. Unless you are actively looking for information on a candidate, A, don't go to Facebook for that. But B, don't look for it. Don't try to change someone's opinion on Facebook. It does not go well, and typically we end up being so impacted by it because we're seeing all the rhetoric, and people are, sitting behind the keyboards and they're fine saying whatever it is that might come to their mind. It's not human-human interaction. If you find something helpful and you want to post it, go ahead and post it, but the idea of being able to limit overexposure to media, whether it be politics, whether it be natural disasters, whether it be devastation, tragic stuff, if you don't have the bandwidth, step away and flex that muscle, because it is for sure a muscle. Everything about social media and media in general is meant to keep you in it. The next post, the next post, the next news story, the next news story. You have to actively push away from it if you're going to and if you want to. And that's a muscle. And what we know, muscles may not start out strong, but the more you use it, the stronger it gets. And so if that's something that you want to work on, being able to say, okay, do I feel like I have the bandwidth right now for social media or for the news? And if not, let me wait. Wait till I have the bandwidth. Let me find a news outlet that I actually can get what I need and then be done with it. And let me focus instead on in-person interactions. Let me call a friend for coffee. Let me talk to someone on the phone instead of trying to get any kind of connection through the media. All right? Any questions? Okay. I want to do a quick side note about supporting children, whether it be you're a caretaker, a parent, grandparent. Supporting children is something that is tricky. Interestingly, I grew up in Florida and never really had a fear of hurricanes. And I realized that's because my parents did a very good job at not making me fearful in those situations. We lived on the water, and my guess is there was many a panic attack by family members in dealing with that over the years. And now as a parent myself, I realize how big of a burden that is to make sure family is safe, home is safe, kids are safe. I didn't feel that because I felt safe in those moments. And so it's finding that balance between letting kids talk about it, letting them know there might be some scary things going on, but then also letting them know you are safe. And it is my job, not your job, to keep you safe. I got this, okay? So encouraging discussion is good. And it's not about, oh, I need to, just tell them this, this isn't a hurricane day. This is just a fun, happy, sunny day. They can know there's a hurricane coming. They can know about evacuations. It is not that fear needs to be feared, but fear needs to be respected and acknowledged and put in its place. So being able to say, yeah, there's some people are scared right now, or even people are recovering. When kids say, what's all that stuff doing on the neighbor's lawn? Why can't I go to school? I just heard from a client this morning that their kid's school was split into 2 schools because they can't go to their campus because it's over in Pinellas. They're now at 2 different schools with their teachers in totally different environments, and it's going to be like that for the foreseeable future. That's a lot for kids. 2 months into the school year, that's a whole lot for kids. So being able to encourage discussion, say, hey, we've been doing a lot of the adult stuff over here. How are you doing? How is that new school? What's going on? What do you notice? Kids are very resilient, which is wonderful, but they also get into their heads about stuff if they don't have the facts. We want to be able to present the facts versus them hearing it from friends who are maybe hearing it from the news or social media or things like that. So being able to encourage discussion, answer questions, and then model healthy coping strategies. If they see a neighbor, a loved one, a family member crying and upset, or they've had to walk through the house that's flooded of a neighbor, a loved one, or even their own, being able to say, this is tough. This is tough. And here's how neighbor had to cry a little bit. It made me tear up. That's okay. Tears don't need to be feared. It's okay to feel these different things. It's okay to sit with these difficult emotions, and I'm not scared of your emotions. As any kind of caregiver, the number one thing that you can share with kids is this idea that your emotions don't scare me, because then they won't be scared of their emotions. And that is huge for emotional intelligence. Limit their media exposure for sure. Same thing with maintaining routines, making sure that there are some things that they can do, and then it could be something that you can help if you know of neighbor, loved one, family member who is out of routines or out of their home. Ask them what you can do to help make their routines easier. I know there have been different chats that I've been on and things like that where one friend said her son, all of his Pokemon cards got destroyed, and that was like his thing. The amount of Pokemon cards that this family received from people who came together and said, take them. But it's about asking for them. It's finding the comfort things, asking the kids, what do you need? Another friend of ours, all their art supplies got destroyed. And this was right after the first hurricane. And she said, we're displaced. Mom and dad are good. We are okay. Our kids are itching to do art. And that would bring such a sense of normalcy. They got a ton of art supplies. So being able, again, to ask for the support if you need it, or to find the people who need support and ask them, what do you need specifically that I can help you with to maintain or essentially kind of find a new normal. Looping in caregivers. So again, share this with parents that you know. But also looping in, if you have kids who are in the school system, let their teachers know what they've been going through. Let them know, okay, maybe it wasn't worst case scenario, but it's not great. And let me tell you how my kid's dealing with it. Maybe everything was fine, but the kid's having nightmares all the time. Let the teachers know. These teachers, every teacher I've talked with, I have 2 kids, every teacher I've been in contact with, or even on the professional side, the more they know, the better. Because if not, they're guessing, and they can't do all the legwork to figure out exactly what kids are going through. But if they know there's a big change, that is so helpful for them to know how you guys are approaching it and what they need. Avoiding toxic positivity goes for anyone. This is not just for supporting kids, but where it comes into play for kids is very similar to adults. But this is the idea that if a kid is upset about something, as opposed to, oh, don't worry about that. That's not anything you need to worry about. You're fine. You're fine. They're saying they're not fine. Let them not be fine. Or even saying, oh, well, you know, you just lost your Pokemon card. Some people lost their whole house. Not helpful. Very dismissive. But you can hold both. So toxic positivity is, let's just look at the bright side. This idea of emotional regulation, this idea of emotional intelligence is being able to say, oh my gosh, that is so hard that you don't have these things, or you lost these things, or you went through this. Man, that's really tough. And sit with them in that. My favorite questions for kids is, what else? When they are venting to you about something, they're likely not done when they take a breath. Ask, what else? What else? Let them get it all out before you jump to validating it, and then jump to, do you want me to help you try to figure out how to make yourself feel a little bit better about this? And not, do you want me to make it better? Do you want me to help you to help yourself feel a little bit better about this? And that way, they're building the skills to do it. But where this comes into play with even other adults, give them space. Give them the what else and what else. Not just, oh, well, you should be grateful. No, you're allowed to be disappointed. And then we can also recognize that there's places for gratitude. Okay? When we end up seeing, and I'll give an example of this that isn't hurricane related, but I think everyone can understand pretty easily, is if one of my kids, I have a 5 and a 7-year-old, and if, say, my 5-year-old's trying to go to sleep and he's saying, I'm scared. If I don't have much bandwidth, my response might be, there's nothing to be scared of. You've slept in this room thousands of times. I gotta go. Which might be what I want to say when I'm ready to shut the door and be done with parenting for the evening. However, much better off for me to say, you're not normally scared in here. What's going on? I might get eventually to the idea of, all right, I don't think there's much else that we need to do. Here's all the reasons that I'm going to keep you safe. Here are all the things that you can do to help. And now I'm going to go. But what we know is that if I say, there's nothing to be scared of, my son's body is going to say, Mom's wrong. Something in my bus is yelling at me that something is wrong. And now I'm not going to be satisfied. I'm going to yell louder. And kids will double down. You thought I was scared before. Now this is the scariest night I've ever experienced in my entire life. So we want to be able to meet them where they are. And so that conversation in that case might be, it sounds like you're scared. What's going on? You're normally not scared in this room. Okay, so what have we done before when you felt scared? Okay, do we need to go check the closet? Do we need to check under the bed? Okay, now let me remind you how I'm mom and I make sure that everything's super safe and I promise you, but your body's still saying something scary. What can we do? What can we do with that? So maybe it is using imagery, using distraction, all different kinds of things that it's for another talk another day. But just the idea of being able to give them space to come up with skills to cope with it versus just jumping to, that's kind of a silly thought. So when trauma, when anxiety, when depression comes up, giving kids or even adults space to have the fears. When you give them space, they don't feel the need to double down because they feel heard. And when we feel heard, that emotion flows like we want it to versus feeling like it needs to get bigger and bigger and bigger. All right, and so that's why we do want to avoid toxic positivity, even if we're encouraging gratitude. All right, any questions? All right. So now I want to move to kind of shift to help others. And to be honest, even that other stuff that we've talked about so far is a great thing to model for others, a great thing to encourage others. But we'll move now to ways to physically and actively support others. I am very much in the camp. It is always better to say something than say nothing. I cannot tell you the number of clients. I've been in private practice for 10 years, and before that was working at the VA and trauma. I cannot tell you the number of clients who I've had who have said to me, no one said anything. They knew what I was going through, and no one said anything. They can see because they've been on the other side of it and haven't known what to say, but it's hard when no one says anything. When there's a death, when there's a divorce, even if this idea, and I've had this happen multiple times, I work with a lot of people going through divorces, and just this idea of it's so quote unquote normalized that people think I should be fine. Or they don't know what to say, or they don't know how to take sides, whatever it might be. But in a situation like this, it's always better to say something than to say nothing. I would always rather err on the side of asking about it, knowing that the person can always say no. And they can say, I'm fine. And that's my cue to say, okay, this is not something I want to talk about. But always, in my mind, better to say something than say nothing. And in general, checking in, but allowing for no response. I'm a big fan of the text that says, hey, no need to respond. I know you got a lot of things going on. Just wanted to let you know I'm thinking about you. It opens the door for them to say something if they want to, but it's not bogging them down. And okay, well, now I have to respond to this person. Now I have to respond to this person. The other piece of this is keep checking in. Make a note in your calendar for a month out, 6 weeks out. That's when everyone else, it feels like everyone else is moving on and everyone's still stuck in this. There's a lot of people who are going to be dealing with this for a long time, waiting for recovery to happen, waiting for insurance to come through, whatever it might be. And it's going to feel like everyone else has moved on. And it might not be front and center in their mind, but man, does it mean something when someone reaches out of the blue and says, hey, whatever happened with this? How are you doing with that? Do you need any support with that? Because this isn't something that just happens while it's part of the news cycle and then we're all done with it. So check in again, set a reminder in your calendar, put an alert in your phone, just say, let me check in with this person because I guarantee you it will mean a lot, even if it's not something that they want to talk about. I also always say this about someone if they lose a loved one, always better to say something than nothing. If you have a thought 6 months down the road about the partner of a friend who passed away and say, oh, you know, this song reminded me, guarantee you it's not going to throw them into a spiral of grief and depression for you to reach out. It is always on their mind. To know that it crossed someone else's mind means something. Always reach out. And again, it doesn't have to be a full conversation, but always, always reach out and keep checking in if you can in these situations. Offering specific support, guarantee you're going to get more takers than if you offer something general. So for example, instead of, can I drop off dinner? Can I drop off lunch? Say, I'd love to drop off dinner. What day is best next week? Or is Tuesday or Thursday better for you? I have a lot of friends who've had babies over the years and things like that, and that's one of my go-tos of how to support because it was so helpful for me when I had my kids. The church even came and brought food at one point, which was wonderful. But just this idea of most of the time someone will say, oh, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. But if I say, hey, can I drop off dinner on Tuesday? I have yet to get a no. If anything, it's, oh, Tuesday's not great, but could Wednesday work? Absolutely. But if you drop off something, if you say something specific, they know you're willing to help. Versus, oh, that's just a pleasantry. They don't actually mean it. Some other examples. So for when we're talking about hurricane stuff, I'm available on Saturday to help with the heavy lifting of stuff. I've got these extra containers here that I don't need anymore. Do you need them? Very specific things. This one was actually a comment from someone at Hyde Park. They mentioned as a way to support, can I come sit with you while you wait for the contractor or the insurance agent? That's an awesome one. That is so good because these things, this idea of I'm having to go back to a place that maybe is unlivable right now, that's full of a lot of negative emotions. There's no power, there's no air. I'm going to be sitting in my car for an hour waiting for this person to show up. I'd love to have a friend. Great, I'll grab coffee. I'll meet you there. We don't even have to talk about it. We can talk about whatever you want, but just this idea of I'm not in this alone. Another big one, can I pick up your laundry if you know that someone is displaced and doesn't have access to laundry, or if you just want to lighten their load for the week. I had a friend pass away a couple years ago, and what we did for her husband, she's got 2 kids. They live up in Boston, so a lot of us were further away and couldn't really help. We chipped in to get laundry service for the year. He said, I have had so many casseroles. My freezer is full. He's like, what I needed was laundry. And that they have that here. They have, or again, if you're willing to do it, say, you know, for the next couple of months, let me know when you need to do the big laundry stuff that you can't do just sitting at the laundromat or you don't want to do. I'm happy to help you with that. But these tangible ways to help with things like laundry, just things that, again, increase other person's bandwidth. Uber Eats gift cards are a very easy one, too, because then you don't even have to worry about them accepting it or not. Most people can figure out how to use it, and they can order food whenever they want to. Being able to do the specific stuff gives you an opportunity to feel helpful, but also increases the chances of someone taking you up on it. Yeah, I was actually going to open to see too if anyone else had suggestions that they have found helpful. But McGray, do you have a question as well?
Yeah, so what are signs that you can look for if the person you're wanting to support is still in need, but on the other hand, doesn't want to be defined by the need or the thing that they're going through? You don't want to pretend like it's not happening because they're not wanting it to be defined by it, but you also want to be helpful. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think the biggest thing is following their lead. And it kind of goes to the what else component of let them get out what they want to get out, but if it seems like they're wanting to switch gears, switch gears. And I would say for a lot of these, especially if it's someone that you're close to, don't only reach out to them about the loss and the support. It can also be, hey, partner and I are going to grab dinner. Do you want to come with us? Not at all really anything that you would normally do, and invite them to and include them in, but give them space if they can't. Don't stop inviting them, but following their lead. And even being able to say, I'm flying blind a little bit here. I really want to support you. I'm not exactly sure how, because I guarantee you, not every person is going to be different in what they need. And so being able to essentially admit our own faults as humans, that we're not mind readers, and say, I'd love to continue to check in with you. Is it annoying when I check in with you about this stuff? Is it too much? I want to follow your lead. But absolutely, I think being able to just be mindful that we have to be able to check in a way that's most helpful to them, and we don't always know what that is. Does anyone have examples of anything they've seen in town? I mean, I'll tell you one from our neighborhood. This wasn't this storm, this was another one. There was one house on our whole block. It was a storm where a lot of people lost power. The one house had power. Everyone's cleaning up debris the next day. The woman who lives there is walking around with a pot of coffee, walking up and down the street with plastic cups or styrofoam cups and a pot of coffee, because she knows her house is the only one that has power, and that's what she can offer. And I guarantee you, she has never served more coffee in her life. But it was such a heartwarming thing to say, okay, this is what I have to give. Who needs it? And that idea of all of us in our yards trying to clean up with no power, with no coffee, none of the restaurants were open to get it. So little things like that can mean so much. It's just this idea of what do I have to give? I don't need to feel guilty about having it, but can I share it? In our neighborhood just recently too, a lot of people were still out, but some people were on generators and no one could find ice. So people were emailing around and saying like, okay, either where can I find ice? And people said, I have a generator. Bring a gallon bag. I have a gallon bag for you. Come fill up on ice. Come sit. Another one had a phone charging station out in front of their house and literally said, there is an electrical cord outside on the porch. You don't even have to talk to us if you don't want to. Come charge your phone. So little things like that I think can be helpful, especially in the moment there. But does anyone have any examples of things that either they found helpful or feel that would be helpful moving forward as this is a little bit vaguer of needing support?
Well, I have a friend, well, people know I have kind of a busy schedule. So I had a friend over in St. Pete that got completely flooded out. So I texted her last week and I said, I have my Thursday free.
Perfect.
Come up with what you want me to do.
Perfect. I love that.
So she knew I'm busy, and if I'm telling her I got Thursday free,
Yes.
she better take me up.
It's a real offer too.
Real offer,
Yeah.
And so she did.
I love that. And I like that idea of I have this block of time. You tell me what you need versus me trying to guess.
Right.
Which kind of speaks to McGray's question too, that they'll be able to, it could be like, I need to get away from here and not think about it at all. I need to, go to lunch in a totally different area where I'm not going to see debris.
Yeah.
Great, let's do it.
And she had other stuff to
Yeah.
do, so she could give me, I packed the kids.
A to-do list.
Yeah.
Perfect.
It's like, here's the boxes, here's the wrapping paper. Go
I love that.
I was just telling her, this is a day of God.
Yes.
So,
That's an awesome one. And it's open-ended and something that could literally work for anything, even if you just know someone's got a stressful month or a busy week or things like that. Okay. All right. So anything else? Yeah.
This isn't anything I've done because I haven't done anything.
That's probably not true. You're here. That's a good start.
I loved your discussion of Pokemon, but that leads me to how to do things. And I recognize that this was with a child, and your suggestion in dealing with children was, how can I help you figure out how to make yourself feel better?
Yeah.
So, in the case of the Pokemon, I don't know if the child was asked, how would you feel better? And that child said, I want all my Pokemons back, and so then everybody did it. If you don't have that situation where you can have them tell you
Mm-hmm.
what you want, how would you know to send them the Pokemon?
As the outsider or as the parent?
As
an
I'm
outsider.
using Pokemon because you
Yeah,
used it.
yeah, yeah.
but anything that would make, you know, it sounds to me in the Pokemon example that the child somehow
Gave the indication.
Gave the indication
Yeah.
that, boy, I'd sure like to have a
Yeah.
bunch of Pokemon. So if I'm wanting to help someone
Mhm.
and I ask them, how can I help you?
Yeah.
And
They might not know. That's actually a really common of like, I don't even know how you could help. In that case, I'd suggest some things. So this idea of like, I could drop off dinner. Do you want me to watch your kids for a little bit? Is there any actual support that you need? Is it that, you know, the kids' clothes got ruined and do you need new clothes? Is it helpful for me to get you out of the house for a little bit? So giving almost like a little bit of a laundry list of these are the things I'm more than willing to do. But if you think of something else, let me know too. Because if bandwidth and that rubber band is stretched so thin, they might not be able to come up with the things, but they might know it when they see it. So being able to come up with some suggestions and say, kind of just offhand, here are some things that I could help with, I think that's a good place to start for sure. And again, just follow in their lead. Okay. So I want to go briefly through this list of just some community support stuff that might be helpful. Being able just to figure out what you don't need. If we're talking bigger community, it's a great time. Hopefully you were not forced to clean out your house like a lot of people were. But the idea that there might be an opportunity to clean out your house, figure out what you don't need, furniture, toys, linens, clothes, there is definitely a need that some people are trying to refill homes or spaces and recover lost things. So that's a great thing to do that not only will hopefully help your space feel a little bit lighter, but can be donated very directly to something very useful. Connecting with local schools is also huge. My kids go to school in Town and Country that got really severely damaged in that area. And there's a school, Dickinson, right there, where most of the school is on free and reduced lunch. And so these kids went at least a week without even the free and reduced lunch at school. So there's a lot of food instability. A lot of them lost their homes and clothes, shoes. So there's some parents from my kids' school who have connected with them and said, send us an Amazon list. Send us a link to an Amazon wish list. And if and when you can find those wish lists, again, they're everywhere. Even if you put it up on Nextdoor, the Nextdoor app, if anyone's familiar with that, a community, and say, what schools need help, call a school if you know it's been affected or in an area that's affected, and fulfill some Amazon wish lists. It could be sneakers, it could be clothes, it could be pajamas, blankets, pillows, all of these different things. That's a great way and a great resource because not only is it helpful to the children, it's a great way to get to the families most in need. It's not just the kids who are going to be impacted, but their families as well. Feeding Tampa Bay is one that I love, but one that's it is literally probably the easiest place, aside from maybe here, to volunteer to help with people who are dealing with food insecurity. All you do is you sign up online. Trinity Cafe is it's in just a little bit north of downtown. You just show up. There is no huge hoops you have to jump through, anything like that. It's an hour and a half, and you help serve lunch. There's going to be more and more need there, and my guess is here on Sunday mornings because of food insecurity. Because people who were living paycheck to paycheck can no longer even have jobs, or maybe have more things that need to go towards finding stability versus food. Feeding Tampa Bay also has an emergency response program that is still set up, that's still offering hot meals to people. You can sign up for a specific place to go and man a table and help people get the resources that they need. Charity Navigator is a great one as well. There's Hurricane Helene and then there's also Hurricane Milton. Unfortunately, I put this presentation together right in between the hurricanes, not knowing, and as it was pointed out to me, it needs to be dealing with natural disasters, plural, instead of just natural disaster. Did not see that coming. But anyways, Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton are both on there. And Charity Navigator is great because it lists the charities associated with hurricane recovery and what exactly they're doing. Boots on the ground, whether it be here, whether it be in North Carolina, you can see what they're actually doing. So if you have financial support to give, it's a great place to check out and see. Volunteer Florida is also another great one. Volunteerflorida.org. You can search by zip code and see what's going on in your area in any volunteer capacity, but there's a lot of hurricane relief stuff going on right now. And even if you're dealing with your own stuff, we know typically volunteering fills us up more than it depletes us. Even if it's something where we feel like we're putting energy in, we usually get a lot more out of it than we end up putting into it, which is a great thing right now to make sure we're filling up as well while we can help others. And then this was actually a really neat one that was new to me. Is anyone familiar with Oasis Opportunities? So Oasis Opportunities was kind of like a grassroots organization that started with a couple Tampa Palms parents, and they provide they provide clothes to school-aged children, teens and kids, and they actually go into the schools and have a schedule with the Hillsborough schools that they meet with, and essentially like a closet for these kids to shop. So they're making sure kids get clothes, and this has been going on for a while, but very much so now they need support. Not only do they need people to go into these schools and kind of man some of these different pop-ups for getting the kids the clothes, they need the clothes, more clothes, but also one of the things that I found most interesting is they need people to wash the clothes in your own home. You go pick it up, you take it to your house, you wash these kids' clothes, you bring it back so then they can get the clothes to the kids. So if that's something you're able to offer, it's a great one as well. So again, that's oasisopportunities.org. And so there are a bunch of these. And if you know any families in need, Oasis Opportunities is specifically for kids who are on the free and reduced lunch program. That's how to qualify. But any Hillsborough school kid, I believe Pinellas too, can just go to their guidance counselor and ask about this program and get connected with them in order to get clothes, which again is so needed right now. So those are just a couple. My guess is there are others as well, but in the interest of time, I want to move just to the last thing real quick. If there's any other questions? No? Okay. So I want to do a real brief note about the holidays. We're going into a time that we've got politics, we've got hurricanes, and we've got holidays. It's a lot going on at once. And even just recognizing that the holidays can be a lot of mixed emotions for a lot of people in general. Now you take into account going through natural disasters, going through political elections that 50% or more of people will be disappointed in how things turn out. That's just how politics work, is there's going to be a majority, but then there's going to be a minority, and the minority's probably going to be pretty big on either side. So recognizing that we want to be intentional about the way that we approach this holiday season to make sure that we're getting out of it what we want and that we can feel refreshed by the time we get to January, okay? So being intentional with your time and energy, avoiding the interactions. If there is a holiday party that you usually look forward to and do not have the bandwidth for this year, do not go. Don't go. There's no shoulds about where you should or shouldn't be putting your time and energy. This is, I want to put my energy here or there. Being intentional about it also means that you can prioritize and do less so you can actually enjoy more. If we're thinking about that rubber band, what I don't want for any of you is as we go through November, December, the rubber band is more stretched and more stretched and more stretched, ready to burst by the time we get to January 1. So take out the things that don't fit. Prioritize what you do want. Prioritize the self-care piece and make sure you got some flexibility in there. And recognize it doesn't have to look like it's always looked. If you have loved ones who are displaced, they might be a little off this holiday season. That's fine. Give them the space. If they can't do some of the things that you usually do, give them the space. If you can't do them, give yourself the space. But set some realistic expectations. Avoid the shoulds. They should be doing this. I should be doing this. They shouldn't be talking about politics at the dinner table. I wish they wouldn't talk about politics at the dinner table. I need to go excuse myself and sit with the kids for a little bit. That's fine. Set the boundaries. But the shoulds don't help. The family member who always kind of gets himself in trouble is continuing to get himself in trouble. Don't expect any differently. But instead, figure out what you want to do. Do you want to have an action-oriented step? Maybe it's even removing yourself. Maybe it's talking to that person. Or is it acceptance? I'm not going to change them. I need to change how I do this. I need to change how my bandwidth is going into this situation because I know I need a lot going into here. Okay? Creating the habits, again, that increase in the rubber band, making sure you have that flexibility in the rubber band, taking care of yourself, making sure you're eating the foods that make you feel good, you're nourishing your body, you're taking care of your body, so you have the bandwidth to do these different things. One quick note about self-care is if socialization is a self-care thing for you, make sure it's the people that you want to connect with and that fill you up when you do it. And if it's the big party you don't want to do, but there's one person there that you always look forward to seeing, schedule coffee with them another day. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can be, I really can't do another get-together or that big of a get-together. So instead, would you mind meeting me for lunch later that week? Find the pieces of it that you really enjoy and let go of the other ones and figure out how you want this season to feel so that you know how to navigate it. And then again, we'll come back to gratitude real briefly. Number one way to boost mood and feelings of well-being is gratitude. Gratitude not just for the big stuff. Okay, I'm glad I have a roof over my head. I'm glad I have a couple friends that I could call if I need them. Being able to say, wow, the weather dropped a little bit today and it feels good. That's an in the moment. I am present in this moment and I recognize something special about today. Because if between now and January 1, you find one special thing, one thing you're grateful for that's specific to that day, that's a long list of special days and special things. Even when there's cloudy moments or even cloudy seasons, we can find the special thing in each day. And when we start training our brain to do it, it starts doing it itself. It's a muscle, and that muscle will get stronger and stronger the more we practice that. So being able to say, okay, what is it that I'm grateful for today? Being able to encourage family members to talk about what they're grateful for versus just looking at the stuff that maybe is overwhelming or hard or difficult, all right? And then lastly, checking in with yourself. There's no right way to do this, any of this, and being able to check in with yourself and figure out what's working and what's not. Being able to say, okay, I thought I had the bandwidth for that. I don't. I need to take a break. I need to take a couple days off. I need to cancel something, even if it's last minute. If it's from self-love, not from fear. If it's from self-love, it will serve you better than going through with the thing that is done out of fear or a feeling of obligation, because that will just breed either burnout or resentment, all right? So being kind to ourselves, being kind to others is really the bottom line of all of this, giving space for all of these things so that we can be what we need to be for us and what we need to be for others, all right? Any questions or comments? Yeah.
First of all, Erica, thank you so much. This has been an incredibly rich and very helpful experience, and so many of these principles are applicable beyond the realm of natural disasters, just basic stressors in everyday life. So, Sally, I'm sure you were going to invite people to do this, but we want to thank you for your time here, and I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So, any tips you have on emotional resilience when it comes to just general waiting for processes of recovery that are beyond your control? I think about waiting for the power to come back on, waiting for the debris to be picked up, waiting for the claims adjuster, waiting for the contractor, waiting for just a series of phone calls that you just don't know when it's going to happen. And then in the darkest moments, you're thinking, how much longer is this whole thing going to take before I feel back to normal again? Waiting and patience can be very challenging.
Yes.
So what guidance can you give for that?
Essentially, the bottom line of waiting is uncertainty.
Right.
It's one thing to say, okay, I know they're going to call on December 1. That's easier waiting, even though it's still a wait, but most of this stuff is not like that. It's the next 4 to 6 weeks, the next 2 to 3 months. Uncertainty, and our brain does not do well with uncertainty. But one of the number one things is to recognize uncertainty is not a threat. Uncertainty is not danger. Uncertainty and sitting with uncertainty is very much a muscle, but part of it is just being able to say, I am uncomfortable here, but I'm not in danger. I am uncomfortable and I wish I could speed through this and get to the answer or get to the final finish line to be able to have everything calm down. But right now, I'm actually okay. I'm just uncomfortable. And the more you sit with discomfort, the easier it gets, because you put these things in, like the self-care, being able to put in, okay, in the waiting, I don't want to just white knuckle it, where can I find some joy? Where can I find some gratitude? As opposed to feeling like I'm just wishing away the time. You've probably heard this quote, but the idea of when one door closes, the other one opens, but it's hell in the hallway. So this idea, I know, there you go. It's the waiting is so hard. Our brain does not do well with waiting. And so even if we can sit there and say, okay, maybe something positive will come out of this, or I'm going to feel settled eventually, being able to just acknowledge the waiting is terrible. The waiting is hard, and just being able to acknowledge that and validate that versus, oh, I should be grateful. Oh, I should be settled. I'm not going to feel settled, but I'm also not unsafe. I am okay, even though I am unsettled. But our brain doesn't like uncertainty or unsettledness. It can be trained, though, to sit with it. Okay? Anything else?
So you know what the problem was? You had this anticipation of the hurricane, and you kept waiting and waiting.
Is it coming? Is it going? Is it
And
coming?
now you're waiting and waiting and waiting to make everything good again.
Yes.
It's just.
And this is where it's finding the good while you're waiting. As opposed to everything has to be settled before things will be good, it's what's good today. This stuff isn't good. And maybe a big part of the pie chart that makes up my life is very unsettled, but this little sliver, there was some good there. There was a glimmer of good there. And being able to call attention to that so that it doesn't feel as dark and overwhelming. But you're right, and the other piece that circles back to is even what we started with is the slow, deep breathing, is being able to recognize the waiting is what puts us into fight or flight because our body is anticipating a threat, and it's not a threat. So we need to be able to do that slow, deep breathing and say, waiting is okay. It will happen. I can fast forward in 5 years and I'm going to be in a totally different place. I can fast forward to a year and I'm going to feel so much more settled. Right now is hard. How can I get through right now, this day, so then it's a day-by-day thing, okay? Mm-hmm.
Do you have any suggestions for any written material to help with sitting with negative emotions and dealing with that? And I know the best thing would be to see a therapist and to train yourself to learn how to do that and using the right tools in your tool belt and all that. But is there something you might suggest that we could read?
There are so many that have to deal with sitting with uncertainty. If you want to email me, I can send you, I have a kind of book list that I tend to pull things off of and can absolutely send a couple recommendations. I'm a big fan of podcasts. It's an easy way to digest information if you're going on a walk, and I'm a big fan also of kind of habit stacking. So if I want to be able to get more information, but I also benefit from going on a walk and going outside, there's 3 birds with 1 stone. And so being able to even just look up, even on Google, being able to look up Sitting with Uncertainty podcast. My guess is there's going to be a wealth of information that you can get that way, and it's all the same basic stuff. If it feels really off, it's probably not a reputable source because everyone's going to say the same thing. It's practice. It's repetition. It's being able to figure out how to sit with it in a way that you're using, again, that distraction intentionally, but then being able to remind your body, I'm not in a threatening position. I am not in harm's way. And the emotions flow when we do that. And that's all we need is for them to flow, to deliver their message, and then to be done. But you're absolutely right that some of the best, once you get the basics of it, some of the best opportunities to do that would be with a friend or a family member or a therapist to be able to talk through some of it, to be able to sit with it and have to sit with the anxiety that sometimes comes with holding uncomfortable feelings. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a question from Doretha in the online space. How do you respond to those who say to you how lucky you are? There are so many people who are dealing with more.
Yes. That's it. Yes. I am so lucky. I'm also dealing with a lot, but absolutely. If that is their stuff that they're coming with in terms of whether it be, oh, well, you have it so good, you shouldn't be upset at all. Essentially what that means is that person feels as though they're on the inner circle. If we go back to that person in need and then the people out, they don't have space for my stuff. So I don't need to defend myself to them and say, oh yeah, but think of all the things, this was hard and this was hard. My answer is, yeah, I do feel really lucky. And if I need space or support, I'm looking outward, not towards that person to provide it. I'm finding someone, the concentric circle out, who I can say, yeah, I do feel lucky compared to some that other people, but man, I'm having a hard time with this. And I don't know what to do with these heavy feelings because I know other people have it quote unquote worse, but I'm also having a tough time. So yeah, if anyone wants to get into the comparison game, politely bow out. Say yes, agree with them, and then move on. They're not in a headspace where that's going to be helpful for anyone to try to have that one-upmanship going on. All right. Anything else online? No? Okay, yeah?
I have a question, just because a lot of us are grieving for other people, right? Like, so it might not be our grief, but we're feeling the grief that other people are experiencing. So would you recommend the same thing, that we set aside a time for grief, or would you say we should turn it into action? Like, what would you say is best for those of us that are feeling grief for friends and family?
I think it can be both, and I think it depends on the person. But I think for sure, if there is a jumble of emotions, which most of us are feeling, save space for it. That's not action-oriented. It doesn't. I like to say we're human beings, not human doings. We need to also just be for a little bit, and maybe it is on your walks in the morning. And I do know you walk because you're my neighbor, so this is specific. Most people know that, but this idea of being able to say, okay, on my morning walk, I'm going to think about my heart breaking for these people, and I'm also going to think about what constructive thing can I do for them. One thing that I've heard over and over again, both personally and professionally these last couple of weeks, is this feeling of dodging a bullet. And this idea of even if I feel like I'm somewhat unscathed, I still have almost the same experience of it could have been me. It was my neighbor, it was my loved one, or it shifted slightly south, and that could have been us. And that's traumatic. And this idea that you talk about that anticipation, is it coming here? Is it going there? Are we going to be the ones on the news tomorrow? Or is it going to be this neighborhood on the news? And just knowing that because of where we live, we're in the midst of all of this. And we have to be able to sit with that. And I think being able to play the tape to the end so we don't end up traumatizing ourselves of the what ifs, being able to say, instead of, oh gosh, what if it was me? What if it was me? Being able to say, it wasn't me. Here's what I'm going to do to keep myself safe moving forward. But that's not what happened. I wasn't in the line, the direct line at this point. And here's what I need to do to reassure myself I'm safe. And here's what I need to do to process these emotions and to continue to support others. But it's a big tangled web. And that setting aside that space is where you can really start pulling on those threads and see what they're trying to tell you. Because it's usually a lot of different things. And if we don't spend time or attention looking at it, it stays that jumbled mess. Mm-hmm. Did that answer your question?
That's so good.
Okay.
So good. So good.
Along that line, I always felt bad as we did evacuate, but we were sitting there watching the news, probably too much.
Uh-huh. Like we all do around the hurricanes.
And I, you know, we were both sitting there hoping it would go a little further south.
Yeah.
But then I always recognize now I'm wishing it on somebody else
Yeah.
because it's going somewhere.
I will tell you, anyone down south would be wishing it would go further south. No one is saying, I can handle this, bring it on. Everyone's saying that. That is human nature. It's not that you're wishing it on anyone else. The wish is really, will this thing just disappear? Wouldn't that be wonderful if this thing just fell apart? But we know, living in Florida, that's not how these work. So that's not the wish. The wish is, please not my house. Please not my loved ones. And again, the people in Siesta Key were probably saying the same thing, just a little south, a little south. And so just recognizing that's a human nature thing. And sometimes it's going to be us, sometimes it's not. But knowing that the way that your brain is trying to send messages to you, you don't really have much control over that. You have control over what you do with them. And being able to talk back, and as opposed to saying, okay, I feel guilty, being able to say, okay, that's kind of a human thing that I'm feeling right now, and shocking, I'm human. Okay? All right. Yep.
I have a very awkward situation work-wise. I deal with properties in Asheville. And I am currently in a situation where I'm in the middle of a transaction for a client, and the other side has said, you don't know what we're going through. And it's turned into
The one-upmanship, yep.
And it's, you know, literally, yeah, we do know.
Yeah.
We do know.
Yeah.
And they are not directly impacted.
Yeah.
It turns out it's a friend of a friend.
Okay.
And
Almost using it, yeah, it feels
exactly.
uncomfortable.
And the issue is you don't want to be heartless. So you
Yeah.
preface everything with, you know, in full respect
And
of.
especially if you're doing electronically where you
Oh,
can't get
absolutely.
tone and all of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, in respect. However, we
Yeah.
do have a deadline.
Yeah.
And such and such can't check out
Yeah.
at this moment. And they were not directly impacted.
Yeah.
But without saying, without
Yeah.
getting into the should-ofs
Yeah.
and that nonsense,
Yeah.
I mean, that.
Well, this goes to that thing, you know, this idea of my son being scared going to bed, and as opposed to saying, you are so safe. Do you know that other kids, they're actually sleeping on the streets, or they're actually dealing with big, scary things. You're so safe. Being able to say, I get that you're going through something right now. Validate it first. And then move on to that. In light of everything you've got going on, what is reasonable here? Here are my needs.
And that's exactly.
Here are your needs. Can we make this deal work? And that way, because what you don't want is them doubling down. Because again, if I'm telling my son, well, you could have it so much worse, he's going to say, well, let me tell you how bad I have it. I will double down and tell you how scared I am and all of these things because he's feeling invalidated. They're looking for validation. Even if it's something that you don't buy into, I know my son is safe. I don't buy into his fear in that, but I'm not going to tell him that. He's a little kid. So being able to say, okay, you're going through a lot. We don't need to get into a one-upmanship. There's a lot going on there. I have an idea of what's going on because we're dealing with some of that here as well in recovery. But also, here are my needs, here are yours. Can we figure out how to make this work? Now, and this is something that I think is just very good imagery that I use a lot with clients, is as opposed to you on one side of the table and them on the other side of the table, at each other, pull them onto your side of the table. Here's our issue. Our issue's in front of us on the table. It's getting the deal done. Come on my side. You tell me what you need. I'll figure out what I need. And can we get this done together? Versus feeling like it's opponents in those situations. But I think just validating to start, my guess is they won't feel as much of a need to double down because they'll feel heard. And at the end of the day, you don't have to prove to them anything about what you're going through here. And if that's what they need, let them have it. You know, this idea of what do I do if someone says you're so lucky, or you're like, you don't understand? Yep. If that's what they need, give it to them. Yep.
This is fantastic.
Good. All right. My email is on here too, so if there are any other questions, it's this top one here. Feel free to shoot me an email. If there's anything that you need extra support with or any specific questions or resources or things like that, feel free to let me know. All right. Yeah. My pleasure.
And Matt, it is true that this can be shared with people later on YouTube or some other arenas?
Yes, if people go to hydeparkumc.org/copingafterdisaster, it'll link shortly, probably in the next 30 minutes, to a replay of this.
Okay.
Because there was a lot of information.
There is.
Super helpful, but it's almost too much to take
Yeah.
in, especially right now when we are a jumble of emotions.
Yeah, and if you want a copy of the handout for anyone, I mean, there's some extra was probably floating around too, but if you want a copy or if you want a copy of the presentation, email me. I'm happy to send it to you. Matt also has it. Yep, you have it too.
I'm wondering if we could post a PDF of this handout as part of
Yep,
the slide.
Matt has it, so I'll leave it up to the tech guru.
Great. Thank you all. Be gentle with yourselves. Keep breathing. Take it one day at a time. God bless. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
All right, online folks, thanks for being here with us online today. Yeah, cool, I'm on. McGray just almost interrupted me. He might want to, he's going to get on here for a second. Look at him, he's such a, no, right there,
Oh,
right there. Hey, there, hey. Okay, so, anyways, I'm so distracted now. There he is. Okay, listen guys, so thanks so much for being a part of this tonight. Some next steps you can take is you can share this with a friend, hydeparkumc.org/copingafterdisaster. You can share that link with a friend and they can rewatch this. I'll put a post with the PDFs and whatnot there. Looks like we'll keep those up a little bit longer than 24 hours, maybe up to a week. So you can share those with friends as well. If you're watching from Palmacia Perez or from Western North Carolina or anywhere outside of the Tampa Bay area and you have a church community, go be a part of that church community. If you don't have a church community, we would love for you to join us in our online space on Sunday mornings. We broadcast live at 9:30 and 11 at hydeparkumc.org/live, or we're available on demand on YouTube starting at 7 a.m. If you want to check out other messages, they're all on our YouTube channel. Just search Hyde Park United Methodist, and we're in our generosity campaign. So if you want to partner with us through generosity, you can also do that by going to hydeparkumc.org/EOG. I'm Matt Hotho. I'm the Director of Production and Online Engagement here at Hyde Park. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.